And now I want to hand it over to the president of Ukraine, who has as much courage as he has determination. Ladies and gentlemen, President Putin.
Funnily enough, I wrote the majority of this script way back at the beginning of summer, with the full intention of posting it long before the election heated up. Well, the length was daunting and I kept pushing it off, and then events kept happening. Biden dropped out, Trump got shot, and in the end, I felt it was too out of date to just fix. However, since Trump has been elected president for a second time, I thought it was fair to dig it up, hammer in new sections, and reveal the old, with the goal of repurposing the script as, why didn't the Democrats win? Additionally, I would like to make the point that while I am a radical feminist, I don't expect radicalism from my audience. In fact, I don't even expect leftism. If you are here, you are obviously willing to listen, and I would much prefer an open mind who I don't agree with on everything, to an audience of yes men that's minute, or to have my voice lost amongst those who feel politically homeless or alienated by the more radical stances. Radicalism has its place in shifting the Overton window, but it doesn't necessarily win over those who consider themselves apolitical or moderate. With that preface, let's discuss why the election turned out this way. Leading up to the election, the common sentiment in leftist and youthful spaces has been that our choices are between the frying pan or the fire. The Democrats have been relying on the notion that choosing the lesser of two evils will keep minorities and women voting the same. But when the choice is between Project 2025, which, to be fair, most people are not aware of, and an administration that has gutted Title IX protections for women, who exactly should you choose to vote for?
There he is.
Joe Biden was not a liberal. He had been a conservative all his life and had remained anti-abortionist until recently, when it became political suicide not to, especially on a Democratic ticket. He previously decreed that Roe v. Wade was wrong, voted for an amendment to overturn it, and as recently as 2006 stated, "I do not view abortion as a choice and a right. I think it's always a tragedy." And in 1974, he noted that the Supreme Court's Roe v. Wade decision went too far, and he didn't think that a woman has the sole right to say what should happen to her body. Considering this was tied to his Catholic religious views, I doubt that his personal beliefs have changed, although one would be hard-pressed to find a politician who is sincere to all of their beliefs. It's hard to trust a president who is willing to do whatever is necessary to remain in office and still be palatable to audiences. Kamala Harris had a similar problem, a lack of authenticity.
Because, church, I know we were born for a time such as this, and I have faith He is going to carry us forward, and the road ahead won't be easy. It will require perseverance and hard work, but in times of uncertainty, Scripture reminds us, weeping may endure for a night, but joy cometh in the morning. The path may seem hard, the work may seem heavy, but joy cometh in the morning, and church, morning is on its way. God bless you. God bless America.
No one likes a fake person. While, again, politicians run campaigns based on false promises and an engineered image, Most stick to their stances throughout their careers, and if they change them, they try to sell that change as organic. However, her use of code switching in Atlanta, where she spoke significantly differently to a majority black audience, made many voters uncomfortable and played into the belief that she was a manufactured candidate. Despite claims from writers like Eric Smith of the Cato Institute that code switching is normal, and to an extent it is, being a public figure wherein both manners of speaking can be easily noticed and compared did rub black voters especially the wrong way. Typically, code switching occurs in different contexts, and as such, the audience communicated with only hears one or the other, or is in on the performance. The other huge issue shared by the two is the lack of charisma. Trump, despite his many fumbles, has a dedicated cult of personality, in large part because he appeals to those who are resisting many broad societal changes, who feel left behind, and, most importantly, feel seen by Trump. His lack of eloquence is part of the charm. This is part of the reason why he's seen large support from Mexican and Black Americans. Additionally, because of the late date at which he dropped out of the race, there was no time to replace Biden and to hold a Democratic convention to choose another candidate, thus denying the chance to choose a representative. Instead, Democrats were assigned one. Most importantly, Biden's presidency and the time it took for him to finally bow out illustrates a deeper-seated problem.
Because, church, I know we were born for a time such as this, and I have faith he is going to carry us forward, and the road ahead won't be easy. It will require perseverance and hard work. But in times of uncertainty, Scripture reminds us, weeping may endure for a night, but joy cometh in the morning. The path may seem hard, the work may seem heavy, but joy cometh in the morning. And church, morning is on its way. God bless you. God bless America.
Joe, you did such a great job. You answered every question. You knew all the facts.
After all, the problem most voters had with Biden was not merely his contradictory statements and political views, but his current behavior and appearance. According to an August 2023 poll reported on by AP News, 77% of U.S. adults said Biden was too old to be effective for 4 more years. Not only did 89% of Republicans say that, but so did 69% of Democrats. After years of clips catching Biden stammering, falling, being inaccurate, and uncharismatic, many Americans viewed staffers' secretiveness about his behavior and health as being proof of a conspiracy to hide his failing health from voters, or worse, to allow a puppet to remain in office. More recent mistakes included referring to President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, the leader of Egypt, as the president of Mexico, which occurred only a week after Biden described the contacts he'd had as president with former German Chancellor Helmut Kohl, who died in 2017, and former French President François Mitterrand, who died in 1996. At 81 years of age, it seems unlikely that the president's aides, who had been quick to deny any problem, had been entirely honest when they argued that Biden had remained sharp as ever and maintained an aggressive campaign and foreign travel schedule, with presidential days running for 12 hours or longer. The simplest and most obvious solution to providing a Democratic victory would have been to have a younger candidate. A younger candidate would have had a less controversial political history and would be more likely to be consistent, as well as representative of the American population, but most importantly, could not be accused of senility. With Kamala Harris having taken over as their Democratic candidate, the problem of age was no longer as prevalent, but the truth is, this wasn't just a presidential problem. With the median age in the U.S. Senate being over 65 years old, and the many recent examples of politicians staying in office far beyond their ability to serve, it's become obvious that the U.S. government has an old people problem. As reported by Abdallah Fayyad in Why American Politicians Are So Old, the late Dianne Feinstein, for example, spent the last few years of her life clinging to her Senate seat, even as she approached 90, despite serious concerns about her mental fitness and clear signs of cognitive decline, including memory loss. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, 82, appeared to freeze in multiple public appearances last year before eventually announcing that he plans to step down from his role. This issue stems not from the American people's desire to vote for elderly politicians, but from a lack of choice. Competition against incumbent politicians has decreased drastically as systemic barriers to entry have grown increasingly more difficult to overcome. Gerrymandering remains a widespread issue. Gerrymandering refers to drawing district lines in a manner which favors the voice of certain demographics, while disempowering others. It has often been used to limit the availability of minorities to influence politics, as well as to keep incumbent politicians in office. A recent study reported on in the Harvard Gazette revealed that because Democrats and Republicans both participate, it often cancels out the wide-scale effect, but continues to reduce electoral competition, leading to more incumbents being elected, and electoral outcomes tend to be less close than the predicted margins. Additionally, polarization has made many Americans into single-ticket voters, wherein voting for politicians based solely on party instead of splitting tickets is far more common. This gives primaries increased power as they heavily influence district division. Once someone is incumbent, it's also unlikely that they'll be removed until they wish to be, as they aren't being voted out and there aren't term limits. The question then shifts to why younger people aren't interested in politics, or at least not interested in running for office, which might then at least introduce new politicians, even if the parties in power remain the same.
It's day 222 of being a girl. I'm in Washington, D.C., and I'm going to the White House to speak to the President of the United States! You know that phrase, I fear I may have girl bossed too close to the sun? Well, that's how I feel today, because I get to sit down with Joe Biden and now this news, and I get to ask him a few questions surrounding trans issues in the United States and talk to him about my transness, and I really just want to represent my community the best that I can. And you know what? As silly as I am on here, I'm ready to step up and show that trans people, we're not going anywhere. And that trans kids, they deserve a fighting chance to be their true selves. Okay? Oh my God, I'm running late. Let's go. And y'all are obviously wondering what I'm gonna wear to meet the president. Here you go. It's the trans flag colors. Cute, right? It's the heels. Okay, Dylan, you're gonna be great. I love you. Let's go. Come on. Do you think I just knock on the front door? Let's go.
Looking for the president's dog.
Our queen. Love you. I love you. We're about to go. Is there anything in my teeth?
Leaving on cloud 9.
The President of the United States gave me a cookie. He gave me a cookie in the Oval Office. Now here's the question. Do I eat it? Or do I save it? It has a seal. Please, honestly, tell me. Everyone, I got to pet the dog. I got to pet his dog. I'm still in shock, and don't be mad, but I don't get to post any of the footage until after the interview airs on Sunday night, but it's going to be worth it because I can't wait for you to hear everything that we talked about. I left with a lot of hope and optimism, not only for just trans people, but many different topics, and the fact that our president has watched Days of Girlhood, it's kind of epic. And I'm not going to lie, I've been having a rough go of it lately. A lot of darkness, and today was what I needed to keep going. Also, if you live in the US and can legally vote, this is going to be one of the most important elections of our lifetimes. So please get out and vote next month. There is so much darkness in this world. I mean, sometimes the bad actually outweighs the good, but we have to get in the mud right now. And we're going to clean up some messes that have needed cleaning for hundreds of years. And we've got to protect each other. And I have your back, and I really hope you have mine, and I love you. God bless America. Oh, say, can you? Okay, love ya.
Another large issue is the inability to separate from gender ideology. While it would be nice if every voter did immense research before voting, the truth is that most are relatively disconnected from politics. Considering the constant fear-mongering and presentation of politics as being a young adult novel's battle between good and evil, and of course, the reality that people are far more focused on their day-to-day than what appears to be a theoretical long-term, it's no surprise that many voters hear one bad thing and vote based on that.
want to understand, like, where is this money going to, and how come, like, we still have so much homeless population here, our roads are horrible here, but we can't get $750 from a hurricane disaster, and now people are out of homes. So I would just like to know where that money is actually going.
I was there in Western North Carolina about a week and a half ago, shortly after Helene went through there, and my heart is with your grandmother and any of your family that still remain in the area. I have friends who are both still actively serving and taken leave to go help out there, as well as many veterans who are going to small towns that no government entity has touched yet. Last night, they had a blizzard warning there in the mountains. They've got people who are homeless, who have no clothes, no food, no access to clean water, and dead bodies that are still being recovered. Unfortunately, the headlines have moved on. Your question is the most important question. When this was posed, this very same question was posed to the White House press secretary. You know what her response was? This is disinformation. The question is disinformation. The problem with this is they are prioritizing other interests ahead of the interests of our fellow Americans, your family, and so many other friends and family who desperately need help right now. And if we dare criticize their failed response that is resulting in people getting sick and potentially dying in the aftermath of Helene, they criticize us for disinformation. This is what happens in dictatorships. Those in power identify themselves as the country, and if we dare criticize them, they then call us traitors who are dangerous. This is why free speech is so important. This is what the First Amendment is all about, and this is why it's up to us to hold them accountable. Otherwise, they're going to continue to put the American people last.
For many moderates, the debates and laws allowing children to take hormones, get surgeries, have destroyed the definition and protections of women, and which have allowed men to enter women's sports and bathrooms, was that issue. While there may have been a contingent of die-hard protesters and half-hearted support from the under-researched, I can't think of many parents who want their daughters to change with men or play against them. For all that the Democratic Party liked to dangle abortion rights as the carrot, they refuse to set down the stick. Perhaps the biggest issue is that many people, despite the Instagram posts and arguments and performativity, simply don't vote. In 2020, only 62.8% of people of voting age voted, which still falls behind many peers, as out of 49 other countries, the US ranks 31st, between Colombia at 62.5% and Greece at 63.5%. A Pew Research study found that many people are just tuning out politics. When it's on every platform and takes precedence in every conversation, it becomes difficult to deal with, and so many simply choose to avoid the conversation. Others believe that the two-party system is not representative or truly democratic and choose not to vote at all. Everyone has checked out. And it definitely doesn't help that there's a constant bombardment of pressure and a new bad thing of the week to rally against. When the alarm goes off every 5 minutes, you learn to tune it out. It makes sense then that people often choose to fixate on that one issue, rather than seeking out a representative picture of current politics and what's really at stake. For example, many who keep up with women's rights and the fight to keep women's spaces for women only will be able to point out that the Biden administration has supported reforms to Title IX and allowed men to access women's prisons based on gender identity. They will keenly remember Dylan Mulvaney's visit to the White House and the overturning of Roe v. Wade. The general discontentment of the past 4 years, from social issues to the economic, are more likely to come to mind than anything good.
Kamala Harris answered a question for Cosmopolitan magazine about a position that she holds on women's safety online. Now, this is a question you will never hear a man be asked or have to answer to, but take a listen to what she said.
One of the issues that I have dealt with in the last few years that is associated but has been highlighted because of technology is what the press calls revenge porn. But I've said stop using that term because the term revenge porn, one, revenge, suggests that she's done something wrong that then deserves this kind of response, which of course is ridiculous. What she did is she was in a consensual relationship taking photographs, sharing them in a consensual relationship, and then she breaks up with dude. And he's upset about it, and then tries to figure out how to embarrass her and demean her and belittle her, and then publishes these photographs. So she has done nothing that deserves this conduct. Porn. Well, one, it's a loaded term, meaning it is loaded with judgment. But two, and most importantly, she did not take that photograph with any intention that it would be published for the public. So it is not revenge or porn. And for that reason, I've said that the term should be cyber exploitation, right? Which is the use, right, of cyber technology in a way that it has been designed and intended to exploit predominantly women. And, you know, on that subject, as with so many things, we're still at a point in America where people are really uncomfortable with women's sexuality. And so there's so much judgment that attaches with that, and an attempt to shame women, right? So, you know, I could go on with more detail, but this is the range of things that I think about when we're on this topic.
While Kamala Harris offered a far more pleasing alternative than Biden did, the influence of his reign cast a shadow on her campaign as she struggled to separate from his own legacy. The American populace is simply tired of being told to choose between two bad options. Americans are tired of being told that they only have one choice, and that there is no nuance, only black and white, good and evil. It would be far easier to just replace the shitty politicians, but that is never going to happen. Even if it did, it wouldn't prevent a similar hard choice from occurring down the line as the population becomes more and more polarized. The American government itself needs an overhaul, and it's not going to get one anytime soon. In fact, it may be even harder to make political change, as the Republican Party seems set on attacking women's rights from angles many people are just unaware of. For example, voting rights. Many men have made jokes about women not deserving the right to vote or needing it taken away. While many misogynistic ideas remain firmly as a fantasy, it should be noted that minorities are able to influence politics far beyond what the individual agrees with. Just as most people are unaware of the many ways that trans rights activism impacts the rights and safety of women, and yet big organizations are able to push those deeply online opinions through policy, the same could easily occur in a second Trump presidency. As Tom Hartman notes in How the Republican War of Women Extends to Voting Rights. Trump, Johnson, and J.D. Vance claim that the SAVE Act is necessary to prevent people who aren't citizens from voting, but they are entirely unable to prove that any meaningful number of non-citizens have ever illegally voted in any American election. After all, it's a felony for a non-citizen to vote, and few are stupid enough to take that sort of a chance. The SAVE Act is a proposed federal law, so first off, it will put a future president, say Trump, in charge of enforcing it, taking that power away from the states. Millions of voter registrations in any state the president decides are problematic could be removed until those voters cure the registrations, and state authorities would have no say in it. And what would the law require citizens who want to vote do? Lacking a passport or other proof of citizenship with their married names, they must produce both a birth certificate with the seal of the state where it was issued, no copies allowed, and a current form of identification, both with the same exact name on them. That could instantly disqualify about 90% of all married women without passports or other proof that matches their birth certificates or proof of a legal name change. For women in that situation, they can still register to vote if they can prove that they went to court to change their name when they got married. But most women just start using their new married name without ever going through all those formalities, although a few states recognize marriage as a legal name change. As a result, as the National Organization for Women details in a report on how Republican voter suppression efforts harm women, voter ID laws have a disproportionately negative effect on women. According to the Brennan Center for Justice, 1/3 of all women have citizenship documents that do not identically match their current names primarily because of name changes at marriage. Roughly 90% of women who marry adopt their husband's last name. That means that roughly 90% of married female voters have a different name on their ID than the one on their birth certificate. An estimated 34% of women could be turned away from the polls unless they have precisely the right documents. Just by coincidence, Republicans will suggest, at this moment in history, millions of American women are seriously pissed off at the GOP. The fixation on finding pure political allies or politicians further helps to prevent women from organizing. The hold on abortion is one major wedge between left and right-wing women, but right-wing women also tend to oppose prostitution, pornography, experimentation on children, and other overlapping issues with radical feminists. There is little need for agreeing on everything as long as the goal of attending to those issues is shared, and recognition of shared issues and where they stop is kept in mind. Kamala Harris made the mistake of running her campaign primarily on the promise that, at least I'm not the other guy. It felt childish and overstated. If anything, I hope that the Democrats create a real platform instead of relying solely on emotional appeals for the next election. Unfortunately, the biggest elephant in the room is that Kamala Harris simply wasn't the right candidate. Throughout her campaign, she battled a pattern of disrespect linked particularly to her sex and race. From the jokes about having to use sexual favors to get where she is, to the scrutiny of her racial identity. It is interesting how common sexual violence or threats of it are for female politicians. Take, for instance, AOC, and how despite there being plenty of similarly controversial male politicians, she was one of the first targets for non-consensual deepfake pornography. The Republicans failed to take into account that America, and the world at large, has seen a widening divide between men and women. While many women are growing more liberal, many men are becoming more conservative. In a poll conducted by Redfield and Wilton Strategies on behalf of Newsweek between March of 23 and 24, it was revealed that a majority of Americans, 57%, have changed their political ideology in the past 5 years, with 23% of them becoming more conservative and 17% turning more liberal. More men, 26%, have become more conservative than women, 19%, while slightly more women, 18%, have become more liberal than men, at 17%. While Harris had some good points, her campaign and the Democratic Party still acted against women's interests through the support of trans-identified males and legalization of nonsensical identities. The weak campaign, lack of representation of what voters actually want, amongst other issues, led Trump to win again. The good news is that the Democratic Party has a chance to learn from this fumble, though the chances to recover dwindle with each failure. In the meantime, it's not just voting. Go work in your community, do grassroots work, volunteer. Running away from the problem isn't going to happen for most who threaten it, and the feelings of despair are simply not useful. Be angry. Use that to change local problems. But for God's sake, stop pretending that this is it. Tomorrow will come for you, and the day after that, and the day after that. Just because the answer to these problems is inconvenient or difficult doesn't mean that there are solutions at hand. This, dear viewers, is where we part. I figured that my previous video on the election wouldn't go over well with everyone, and certainly I've been accused of being not radical enough, or being naive, or not taking it seriously enough. I am far from saying, it's totally fine, we're all gonna have puppies and rainbows. What I am saying is that a lot of people see there was a loss, and therefore I will run away from the problem and not think about it or do anything about it. And I think the people who have lived outside of the U.S., whether they are citizens or they're just people from other countries, find that entitlement to be annoying, as I have mentioned, and naive. And not to mention, the reason why Americans can't just show up and live in Brazil is because America didn't allow Brazilians to have easy access to the U.S. All these countries that we have had perhaps not hostilities, but tension with at the very least, are not going to suddenly say, yep, our borders are open, even though you called us all of these names and insulted us and said we were horrible people. And it's this fantasy that's ultimately useless. It's useless. Yeah, things can, and probably will, get pretty shit. But guess what? If you're here on this channel, you're probably already interested in politics to begin with. So as long as you're reading and keeping up with legislation, you won't be blindsided. You won't be. You'll be able to look and see what's being passed. And if there truly is some massive change, such as, okay, women can't go to school now, you will have the option to leave if you've prepared for it. You will have a head start. The problem that I see is that a lot of people are falling into these pits of despair. And I get it. I don't think I need to flaunt my diagnoses, but I've been diagnosed with anxiety, depression, PTSD, all the labels we love to fling around. And I realized, and I've worked through those, to understand when behavior is just maladaptive and non-useful. Wallowing in your despair and saying, I can't do anything, we lost, this is it, is not going to help you. Not short term, not long term. If anything, it's going to push you further into a depression spiral. What you need to do is change something. Volunteer. Maybe you're not going to help a bajillion women, but you can certainly help women in your community by volunteering at a women's shelter, at a rape center. And you know what? If you work in those type of fields and environments, you'll be able to help if things do get massively worse and suddenly abortion is horrible and you can't have birth control, etc., etc. Don't mistake a desire to remain positive and realistic for non-concern. And don't forget that this is on the Democrats. They definitely had a chance at winning this election, but failed utterly because a series of horrible choices and the expectation that they could coast on the, well, at least we're not the orange guy for as long as possible. The truth is that doesn't work with everyone. The truth is the Democratic Party, well, it doesn't matter if the policy started with Trump. It doesn't matter. What happens is the result is seen under Biden, and thus people who are not politically engaged go, in the environment, the economy, everything bad. Biden must have done it. At its core, I think you need to be realistic about what the opposition looks like and why they voted for this type of thing. Some people simply are not political. They're going to see basic issues. They see the news on a day-by-day basis. They see the rising cost of milk and eggs, and they go, okay, bad prices, inflation, Democrat, and they're not going to think further on it. Most people did not read or know about Project 2025 or understand why it's bad. And yeah, I do hold a little bit of derision for people who refuse to do their own research on certain topics. But if you're someone who just is trying to make it day to day, it makes sense that you wouldn't be keeping up with every single twist and turn in this issue. Anyhow, I feel like I'm a pretty moderate, normal person. I'm not insane. I'm not overly radical, I think, in a way that off-puts most people. But I find it to be important to keep those topics in mind. Anyhow, if you guys have any comments, questions, or concerns, let me know in the comment section down below. And if you are actually interested in moving to another country, well, better get started on that process now. I've moved to Cambodia 3 different times with $600 in my pocket. It's doable. It won't be fun, but if you're really set on that path, do your research, admit you're going to be uncomfortable, and do it. But personally, I have little patience for those who want to complain but never take action. I don't like this any more than you guys do, but I've volunteered, I've worked in my community, and I've left the US. You can do it too. Anyhow, if you guys have any comments, questions, or concerns, leave them in the comment section down below, and I will see you guys eventually. Bye!